know me, my OCD started flaring up. So what I did is I countersunk all the holes. So now you don't see any screw heads from the side. And after I drilled the holes, I brought the piece inside. What I did is I just sanded all the aluminum, as you can see here. Just gave it a nice shine. And then the next thing I did is I used this Easy Cargo thermal glue. And with the bolts and the nuts in place, I just used this glue to put on the nuts. What it did is it just cemented the nut to the piece of aluminum so that when I use my Phillips head and unscrew these, the nut will stay in place. So the next thing I'll do is I'll flip this over and I will use my thermal glue to glue on LEDs on the back side of the pieces of aluminum. I ordered the LEDs from Rapid LED and I got Hyper Violet, 2 Royal Blue, and 4 UVA. So the first LEDs I'm going to glue into place are the Royal Blues, and I'm going to put those closest to the edge. So I just take my thermal paste and then take the LED on the back side and apply just a little bit of thermal paste. Not a whole bunch, just about that much. And then I'll take the LED, put it on the piece of aluminum, and press down. And once I'm satisfied with the placement, I let it go. And that's one LED. And I just continue the same process with all the LEDs. And the next LEDs I'm going to be installing are the UVs. The next LED I'm going to install is the Hyperviolets. And now the last 2 UVs. Now all of the LEDs have been installed. Before the thermal glue gets hard, if you wanted to move around your LEDs to adjust them where you want them, now would be the time to do it, because once this stuff sets, it's like concrete and it will not come back off. So there's my layout. And so now I just have to give these about 24 to 48 hours to dry. And then when they are dry, I will start soldering the jumpers that connects all the LEDs together. And so now that our LEDs had enough time to dry, they are ready to be soldered. When I solder, I am always outside, unless I have some kind of ventilation inside of a room or something like that. But for the most part, every time I solder, I am outside. So what I have here is just a soldering iron, your regular solder, a silver bearing rosin core solder. I have a small pair of dikes and a wire stripper, and wire strippers that have a wire cutter on them. So what I'm going to do is turn on my solder to high and wait for that to heat up. And when that's ready, I'll show you how I solder the jumpers on. So with these LEDs, what I'm going to be doing is starting with the positive and then soldering a piece from the negative to the positive, from the positive to the negative, and from the negative to the positive. So what I do first is I take my soldering iron and my solder, and this is called tinning. So what we're going to be doing is just placing a small piece of solder onto the LED so that when we solder our connections, it's a lot easier. And now when all the LEDs are tinned and ready, we just take our wire. I'm not sure what gauge it is. Looks like it's 20 gauge. And I'm gonna tin the cable. Now I'm going to be starting with the negative and jumping the negative to the positive on these 2 LEDs. Let's make sure we get a nice solid connection. And then when that's dry, I'll cut the cable to about right there and then tin that wire. And then when that wire is tinned, I just take my dikes, press it down, solder that connection in place. And that's our first connection. So as you can see, it goes from the negative to the positive, and now I'm going to go from the negative to the positive on this LED. see, all of the solders are done. All of jumpers are done. If there were any tips on any of the solders, I just knock them down. So if I touch them, they're not as sharp and they won't, cut you or anything. So that's pretty much it. Now I'm going to bring it back into the room and take a little bit more of that silicone and go over some of these connections so they don't rust or anything like that in the future. So I just have this old Radio Shack power converter, and I'm going to set it to 24 volts and give our LEDs a shot, see if they work. So what I did first is I just connected the positive together, and now I touch my negative to the negative plug. They all work. And then when I was done with the testing, I used the thermal glue and use it on every single bare connection I can possibly find on these things, so they don't potentially short out from a water splash or rust out in the future. And now with the LEDs unassembled from the main bracket, what I'm doing now is I'm just making my marks of where the screws are going to go. And once I have my marks, which are there and there, now I'm going to screw this in place. And now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my LEDs and I'm going to screw them to the frame. And here you can see why I drilled that big of a hole. It's so the screwdriver will actually fit through that hole and screw onto that screw like so. And now that the LEDs and the brackets are in place, what I need to do is I need to bend these cables up and drill a hole right here and drill a hole somewhere around here. So now I can stick my wires up through that hole. Like so. And now on the top of the cabinet, these are where the wires stick through. So now I just have to connect those two to this cable. And I'm going to test this before I actually finalize everything. This is the power inserter we used in the house to test. I got it hooked to the LED sump, and I'm going to plug this into the power strip. Look at that. Everything's working perfectly. So today I'm going to be rinsing out the aquarium and the sump and all of the plumbing. So what I'm going to do is I bought this Glad cling wrap, and once the aquarium and the sump are clean, I'm going to use this cling wrap to seal off the top. And now with all the plumbing packed in the sump, I'm going to start wrapping the sump. And with the tank back in place, now I'm going to cling wrap the tank. And everything's all nicely wrapped up and ready to go. Looks pretty good to me. So all of this is now moving out.
In the next episode, I move out of my old place and into my new place. I set the tank into its new home, fill it up, add salt, and once cycled, slowly start moving live rock and corals over. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and ring that bell for notifications of new videos. It's completely free and a great way to support the channel.